to Shattering Myths. We were talking about the conditions that existed in the Garden of Eden during our program on Friday. We're going to return to Yah's testimony about Eden. The reason that we're focusing on it is because if you understand the nature of Yahowah's creation of Adam and what he bestowed to Adam, and how the Garden of Eden was described and what transpired there, if you can accept that, if you come to transition from just simply knowing the broad strokes of the story to understanding everything that is being communicated to us about God's nature and purpose and our role in that purpose, then you know what heaven's going to be like. You know what God is like. You know what he's offering. You know what he wants. You know what it is that we need to do if we want to capitalize on those opportunities. It is just this marvelous picture of the covenant that is presented in the story of the Garden of Eden. And we spent a couple of days focused on a singular word. And just by way of recap, that word was nasalma. It is never translated accurately in any English Bible account. Nasalma is our conscience, the seat of judgment, the ability to be discerning. It is the part of human nature that the media and politicians, through political correctness and particularly academia, are trying to attack. But it is the nasalma that enables us as humans, distinguishes us as humans from other animals, that enables us to respond to what God is offering. We, like all animals, have a soul, a nephesh, which enables us to observe and respond to and react to our environment, but so that it's not just a knee-jerk, I'm hungry, I want to eat that kind of reaction, but instead as a thoughtful response, we were given a nasalma. It is our ability to understand. So not just to know, but to understand who God is and what he is offering to us. And we spent then a better part of a program or two just devoted to understanding the terms. What gan, which is from garden, which we get garden, gan means a protective enclosure, which is specifically designed to nurture life. So gan, Eden, and Eden is a Hebrew word for ultimate pleasure, delight, extreme satisfaction, a favorable state. So that's what those words mean. If we just say Garden of Eden and you don't know that it is a protective enclosure specifically designed to facilitate growth and life, and you don't know that Eden means great joy, then you'd say, all right, I don't know why I chose Garden of Eden, but all right. Well, if you understand what the words mean, then you understand what the purpose was. And so the passage that we were considering at the end of our program on Friday reads as follows: Yahowah. And it doesn't say the Lord. In fact, of the 7,000 times you see the Lord in an English Bible, that is a religious copy edit. That is religious scholars and publishers and translators deliberately, willfully, knowingly changing the Word of God, misrepresenting the Word of God. God does not refer to himself as a Lord. Lord is Satan's title. It conveys the antithesis of God's nature. And it is in this garden where Yahowah had a personal one-on-one relationship with Adam that we understand that he did not lord over Adam. He wants to act as Adam's father. He conceived Adam. He conceived the garden. He conceived the universe for the express purpose of having a father-son relationship with Adam. Fathers are not lords. And so in this story we find that Yahowah identifies himself by name. That is his only name. Now that's a powerful thought. God says, I have but one name that I want to be remembered and referred to for all time by all people in all places. That, by the way, means that even if Christians knew Yahushua's name and didn't change Yahushua's name to Jesus Christ, that in reality, Yahushua isn't so much a name as it is a mission statement. It means Yahowah is saving us. Yahowah is his name. What he did as a corporeal manifestation of his nature was to save us. So here we have Yahowah, Almighty, planting an enclosed garden, this gan, a covered, surrounded, protected, defended shelter suitable for sustaining life in Eden in great joy. While it's a small thing amongst big ones, God did not say that he planted the Garden of Eden. Ba means in or with, not of. So this is not him planting the Garden of Eden, but instead God planting, establishing, firmly embedding the seed for an enclosed garden in great joy, in Eden. Further, nata literally means to establish upright, making nata, which is the verb here that was translated planted, it speaks of establishing, firmly embedding someone so that they can be upright. The old campfire song Kumbaya, well, Kumbaya means stand with or in Yahowah. Stand by, with, in Yah. And that's the dominant foundational concept of the Torah. You see it emblazoned in Yahweh's name. There's only two repeated letters in Yahweh's name, the He, and both of them depict an individual standing up. God wants us to stand by him, with him, walk with him. And so the first letter of Yahweh's name, which is why it's so important, shows him reaching down to us with an open hand to lift us up so that we can stand with him. Once you understand that it's God's purpose to get on his knees to lift us up, then you understand the whole religious concept of being down on one's knees and praying to God and prostrating oneself to him is the antithesis of what he's looking for. If you get down on your knees to talk to God, then you have no idea who he is. And I can assure you he's not listening. He wants us to stand with him. You know, when we have little children, we will often get down on our knees to lift them up. We don't ever ask our children to bow down in our presence. And so this concept of God creating Eden so that we could be established and stand with him is extraordinarily telling. It's as telling as the letters which comprise Yahweh's name. In reality, and this is what Yahushua means, Yahweh stood up for us so that we could stand with him. It is the story of the Torah. It is the purpose of the covenant. It's the reason that the universe exists. Therefore, Bereshith 2:8 is saying, Yahweh Almighty established an upright, protective shelter, conducive to life, which provides complete satisfaction and the most favorable state. Yeshayahu, which is the most prolific prophet in terms of the sweeping historical portrait that the words that he shared with us provide anywhere in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. And before I share what Yeshayahu wrote regarding the conditions in Eden and what they mean to us, well, Yahweh was kind, generous, in the sense of calling folks like Isaiah, Yeshayah, or Yirmiah, Jeremiah, or Zechariah, Malachi, which means messenger, Malachi. Well, he was generous and called them prophets, And he does. He refers to them as prophets. They're really not prophets. What they did is effectively act as a scribe and conduit. Yahowah is the prophet. And in reality, he's not even a prophet, but we'll get to that in a moment. Yahshua was chosen by Yahowah for the express purpose of communicating his sweeping predictions that would transpire over thousands of years. And so, rather than Isaiah acting in the role of a prophet and says, I'm going to predict the future for you, all he's doing is conveying what Yahowah said through him. Now, I mentioned before we go to this prophecy that Yahowah himself isn't really a prophet. That's also true, at least in the sense of the perception of the term as opposed to the actual nature of the term. To be a nambi, to be a prophet in Hebrew, means that you're conveying the testimony of God. Well, Yahowah was providing his own testimony, so that would fit that definition. And we've considered prophecy as someone who predicts the future, but God is not predicting the future. There's a reason that every one of Yahowah's prophecies turns out accurately. That is, he's already witnessed our future. Because he is energy-based, he's not stuck in the ordinary flow of time. He has already witnessed everything that's going to transpire over the next 1,000 years. In fact, over the next 1,020 years to get us to the end of the millennial Shabbat. He has seen it all. And so when he is conveying something through one of his prophets, a nambi, he's just reporting future history. He's more of a historian in this regard than he is a predictor of events. So here's the statement from Yahowah through Yahshua. By the way, Yahshua means when we talked about the mission statement of Yahusha, the real name of or designation of the individual mistakenly called Jesus. Yahshua, the only difference between it and Yahusha is that the verb in Yahshua, Yahu, precedes Yahweh's name, where the verb in Yahusha, Yasha, which means to save, follows Yahweh's name. So it is, salvation is from Yah or Yahowah saves. We'll return to his statement after the commercial break. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. This is what Yahowah said through Yahshua. Yahshua means Yahweh saves. Our salvation is from Yah. This is 51:1. Listen. This is one of God's favorite terms. Listen to me, to God. He begins. The verb for listen is shama. It means hear what I have to say. Now, sadly, English Bible translators, based upon the Latin Vulgate, based upon the King James, want people to obey them, and obedience is a big part of religion. It's a control mechanism, and so they have changed shama, which only means to listen. I mean, there's only you can translate shama listen or hear, but that's it. It's either listen or hear in the same concept. Now they change it to obey. But God's not saying obey here. There isn't a Hebrew word for obey. Listen, shama, to me, to God. Now how do we listen to God? We're listening to him right now. I know my voice is a far cry from his. My diction is a far cry from his. But when we read what he said, we're listening to him. Today, Yahowah manifests himself in our world through his word. That's how we come to know who he is. That's how we come to understand what he's offering. And that is the place that we go if we want to establish a relationship with him. He is manifesting himself to us through his word. So he says, listen to me, to God. those of you who are genuinely pursuing vindication. You know, lots of people want to be saved. Christians will ask, are you saved? To be saved, according to Yah's testimony, you need to be vindicated, which is tzedek. You need to become innocent and righteous. Now, according to Paul, it was impossible to become vindicated, righteous from the Torah. The only way that you could become vindicated or righteous was through his mythical faith in his gospel of grace. But the fact of the matter is it's the Torah teaching that provides the instructions on vindication. But understand, God doesn't save everyone. He only saves his children. He has a 100% track record of always saving his children, and he never saves anyone who is not his child. So if you're genuinely pursuing vindication, then you do need to look at what occurred in Eden, and that's what's going to transpire next, because that is where the covenant relationship is presented. So listen to me, to God, those genuinely pursuing, those who are actually focusing upon and exerting considerable effort to move toward tzedek, vindication, righteousness, becoming innocent. Those seeking to know, bakash, those searching by learning information about, those desiring and inquiring about, those requesting to know Yahowah, should be observant so as to understand, looking to the godly rock and enclosure that you were cut out of and set apart from, chesed, that you were cleaved from, and to God's hammering out of the cistern from which you were picked out. When you understand what the Garden of Eden represents, where God says that he created this enclosure, and it is that enclosure that we were picked out. And so he's saying, if you want to be vindicated, the place to look is not to the writings of Paul in the Christian New Testament or the Gospel of Grace or any of that rot. And he says, no. If you're interested in vindication, I want you to focus on that place, that enclosure that you were cut out of and set apart from, and God's hammering out of this cistern from which you were picked out. That's the place you go if you're looking for vindication. So what he's doing here is saying that relationship becomes before you become righteous. Engage in a relationship with me, very similar to that presented in the Garden of Eden, and then I'm in a position to save you. So this prophetic revelation, it's where God says, I want those of you who are serious about this, I want to tell you where you should focus, the right priority, the right perspective. And there are very few things as important to knowing God and engaging in a relationship with him than having the perspective be correct. We'll return in a moment. Returning to this statement from Yahowah, where he is encouraging us to rafah, to exert energy and effort in the pursuit of knowledge and understanding relative to vindication. God is saying here that his approach, the approach that he is recommending, is the antithesis of the Pauline approach. Paul's approach is you don't need to know anything. The Torah is counterproductive. There's nothing to know, nothing to understand. Simply believe. And God said, no, that's not the way this works. Why would I want you to believe when I can be known? Why would I want you to place your faith in something when what I'm offering can be understood? There's a much better way to go about this, which is that if you're willing to exert the effort, the energy to come to know who I am and understand what I'm offering, then you're going to find vindication. But that's the process. God constantly is reinforcing, and here is nabat. It means to properly interpret, to understand, and to appreciate. And it's achieved through careful observation and thoughtful consideration. Virtually everything God says falls into that train of thought. That is why he says, Shema, listen to me. That's why he writes Shamar, closely examine and carefully consider what I have provided for you so that you can know me and understand what I'm offering. It is why he says here that the goal of those who are interested in salvation ought to be this entire process of understanding. And it's interesting here that he begins this pursuit of vindication, our pursuit of vindication, where he says it really needs to begin by listening to him and to our thoughtful consideration of what God has to say. What he's telling you here, particularly when he brings our attention back to the Garden of Eden, if you enjoy learning, if exploring is something that you find pleasurable, if the moments where you are able to take something that you have read or listened to and then make a connection with other things so that you transition from knowing to understanding, if that is what makes you happy, if you find satisfaction in that, if you find great joy, Eden, in that, then by all means, you're going to love heaven, because that's what we're going to be doing. It's this grand voyage of discovery. It is only through learning and understanding and sharing these things together that we grow. That's the fun of eternity. Now, these challenges, in terms of us exerting considerable effort in the pursuit of knowledge regarding vindication, exist for a couple of reasons. Being adopted into God's family and being invited to camp out with him is personal and forever. Yahowah does not want to spend his eternity or to share his home with apathetic dimwits who have ignored his instructions and have turned a deaf ear to his guidance. Now, I'm not besmirching here an individual who has a mental handicap of one sort or another. But that's a very tiny percentage of people. The majority of people just don't care enough to know. They have had their nasalma, their conscience, drummed out of them. And they realize that those who still have a conscience, who are willing to stand up against the flow and point in a different direction and say, there's where the boogeyman really is, like Edward Snowden, they say, oh, guys like that, man, they are pursued. You don't want to do that. You look what they're going to do to you. Well, God is looking for the people that have a backbone, who have a conscience, who are willing to exercise it. And that is because he doesn't want to spend his eternity with somebody who's apathetic. He certainly doesn't want to spend his eternity with someone who doesn't enjoy being observant, because we're going to be exploring his world. We're going to be considering his universal symbols. We're going to be engaging in this grand voyage of discovery for all eternity. That's why Yahowah is going to make a new universe at the end of the millennial Shabbat, so we can actually be witnesses to the entire process. Being there at the moment of conception of a new universe and of new life. It's a marvelous opportunity and experience, if that is your mindset, if that's, as they say, what trips your trigger, because it's what makes God happy. So he wants people around him to spend eternity with him who think that exploration is fun, because it's how we learn, it's how we grow. There are few more interesting ways to spend our time than considering words, which are the ultimate symbols. This is something that God seriously and obviously enjoys. That's how we engage today in this voyage of discovery in terms of coming to know him, understand the universe, its nature, and what he is offering. So in this light, while it is possible that I have alluded to metaphors Yahowah didn't intend, it's highly more likely that I failed to mention metaphors that he intended to bring to mind. Also, since I've included the full benefit of the Hebrew tenses and symbolism behind each word in the amplified version of that text, there is no reason to suspect that Yahowah doesn't want us to examine his testimony closely so that we can fully appreciate what he is offering. Moving on to the next statement that Yah shared with his associate in this regard, the Yahshua, the great revealer of Yahweh's testimony. He said, "Observe, so as to understand." So here's now, you're seeking vindication. He says, if you're seeking a vindication, then you need to listen to him. You need to investigate the evidence and come to understand it. And he was talking about the enclosure that from which we were taken, which would be Eden. And now he says, for those wanting to be vindicated, observe, so as to properly interpret and understand, looking to the godly Abraham. Abraham is a combination of Raham and Ab. Ab means father. Raham means merciful, loving, and enriching. It's a symbol for our Heavenly Father in the covenant. So if you want to understand, look to the godly Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, who bore you. Now, I am not a direct descendant of Abraham and Sarah, at least that I know of. I'm not a descendant of Jacob, who was the child of the covenant, a child, by the way, named Laughter, which defines the purpose of the covenant. I was not that I know of, a descendant of Jacob or any one of his 12 sons who became Israel. But that does not mean that I'm not a direct descendant of Abraham and Sarah. Now, just because racially, genetically, to the best of my knowledge, my line comes through northwestern Europeans, probably Scotch, Irish, and American Indians, principally Sioux, it's still the reality that my most important family heritage, my most important family tree, goes right back to Abraham and to Sarah. And that in this regard, Abraham is symbolically my father, and Sarah is symbolically my mother. She represents the spiritual mother who bore me, and Abraham represents the loving and enriching, merciful father who raised me. Why? Because I'm a child of the covenant. I know that because Yahowah delineated the terms and conditions for participating in the covenant, and so I did what he asked. I navat, I observed, so to properly interpret and understand the godly relationship between Yahowah and Abraham and Sarah. And so I know that Abraham and Sarah provide the role of mother and father of the covenant. I understand that that's why there's two people standing beside the tent peg that secured the home of the first mother and father of the covenant in Yahowah's name. And that's the second, third, and fourth letter that comprise his name. And I'm not special. I'm not somehow given this secret decoder ring. No, I did what God said here. I took the time to carefully consider the request that Yahowah made of Abraham, and I found there was 5 of them. And all you have to do is respond the same way to those 5 that Abraham did, and you're a child of the covenant. And what God is saying here is that if you're seeking vindication, if you're seeking salvation, that's where you look. Because God's perspective on this is he saves his children. That's what he ought to be doing. He protects his children. He nourishes his children. He guides his children. He vindicates his children. So if you're looking for salvation, don't do what the Christian church does, which is they say that you can be saved without even knowing God, without having any idea as to what he said, what he did, what he's offering. You just place your faith in this salvation by grace. And God said, no, it's not that way. If you genuinely want to be vindicated, to be saved, then you need to look at the conditions in the Garden of Eden, and you ought to focus so that you understand Abraham as your father and Sarah as your mother. The covenant. Once you embrace the terms and conditions of the covenant, then Yahowah vindicates his children. For indeed, God says, I invited him to meet with me as one. But then I descended to bless him, and I caused him to become numerous and great. When Shattering Myths returns for the last segment for today, we will consider what God meant when he said that he invited him to meet with me, and then what he meant when he said, I descended to bless him. Great insights are lurking after the break. So Yahowah says, for indeed, I invited him to meet with me. Now he's talking about Abraham, and he's saying, I want you to observe so that you properly understand, looking to the godly Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, who bore you. Now, this is right there at the crux of what you need to understand if you want to come to know Yahowah, participate in a relationship with him, and be saved by him. God here is telling us that the religious order of things is wrong. That those who are seeking salvation before relationship will find neither. Those who seek relationship prior to vindication, salvation, will find both. And that the path to both of these things is through using our minds, is by listening to what God has to say, by using our ears, by using our eyes to read what he has to say, and then to take the time to think about it so that we are not only observing but understanding. And the place to look, if you're interested in engaging with God, is first and foremost the covenant and the conditions that existed in Eden. And when you do that, then you'll come to understand who God is, what he's offering, and be in a place to capitalize on it. So he goes on to say, for indeed, pay attention to this, I invited him to meet with me. This is kara, one of the most important words in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. So far now he's communicated words that are observe and listen and think. And now he's talking about kara. I invited him to meet with me. Kara is so important because kara doesn't just mean to invite, to summon, to welcome, to meet, to read, to recite. It's all of those things. It means to read with me, to recite with me, to meet with me, to attend an invitation, accept an invitation with me. But kara is the basis of mikra. Mikra is the title that is not known by many people. If I were to say mikra in this particular audience, a high percentage of you know what mikra means. But in the general population, you say mikra and they have not a clue. Well, mikra is based upon kara. It's kind of a blend of the moed, which are the meeting times, and mikra, which are the invitations to be called out and to meet with God. Mikra is an invitation to be called out to meet with God. Kara is the verb that defines the purpose of mikra. There are 7 mikrae. Mikrae is the plural of mikra. They are Pesach, Passover, matzah, unyeasted bread. Passover is the source of our immortality. Matzah, unyeasted bread, is the threshold into God's home that cleanses us and makes us vindicated and righteous, so that we can be, as Yahowah would say, chul on Bakurim, which is to be born, adopted into Yahowah's family. Bakurim is firstborn child. This then leads to Shavua, that speaks specifically of the growth and the benefits that come to Yahowah's children. We are on the promise of sevens, or 7 Shabbat, enriched with his teaching and empowered by his Spirit. The remaining 3 steps are Teruah, where Yahowah's covenant children share the enormous importance of these 7 mikrae with all who will listen, leading to the day of reconciliations, where Yehudah and Yisrael are reconciled, and Yahowah reaffirms his covenant relationship with his children, honoring the promise he made to Abraham, to Yishak, and to Jacob, ending in Sukkah, which is shelters where we camp out with God. That is the basis of the mikra, which is based on this verb, kara. That was all set into motion when God said, I invited him to meet with me. Kara. If you want to participate in God's path to salvation, begin with God's invitation to meet with him that is presented by way of the covenant. But then, he says, I descended to bless him, and I caused him to become great. God's idea of the proper relationship is for him to get down on his knees to lift us up, which is what Barak means. I descended. I got down on my knees in love to lift him up. That is the purpose of these mikrae. That's the purpose of the relationship. That's what God is offering us. We'll return to Shattering Myths tomorrow.